Hi everyone, I'm Raden Adawiyyah, and firstly, let me introduce you to what I want to present to all of you today. It is about the study that examines both simultaneous and consecutive interpreting, particularly as they relate to American Sign Language or ASL English Interpreter, and argues for the increased use of consecutive interpreting. Here, the writer explored the role of consecutive interpreting in the education of ASL English interpreters in North America, highlights some of the perception and myths held by interpreters and by consumers of interpreting service, and discuss the impact of choosing simultaneous or consecutive interpreting on the accuracy of the work. Uh, There are two kinds of interpretation. Here, the first one is simultaneous interpretation. This is the process of interpreting into the target language at the same time as the source language is being delivered. The second one is consecutive interpretation. This is process of interpreting after the speaker has completed one or more ideas in the source language and pause while the interpreter transmits that information. Interpreting, whether simultaneous or consecutive, is a highly complex discourse interchange where language perception, comprehension, translation, and production operation are carried out virtually in parallel. In addition, when the interpretation is delivered simultaneously, it is performed under severe time pressure. The next one, this is the role of consecutive interpreting in the education of interpreter. The purpose of the study was to explore the ways in which consecutive interpreting is taught in education programs and to invite interpreter educators to comment on their experience of teaching consecutive interpreting and of using in their professional practice. Interviewers were held with 15 interpreters who graduated for interpreting education program. The results indicate that 10 out of the 15 programs emphasized the need for students to gain a solid understanding of the cognitive process involved by interpreting by acquired text analysis skill, and then to use this to build toward consecutive interpreting exercise. Subsequently, only after consecutive interpreting has been mastered, do students begin to move towards simultaneous work. The problem identified and result that suggests some educators and recent graduates of interpreter education programs see consecutive interpreting only as stepping stone to the development of simultaneous interpreting, not as a mode of interpretation to be used throughout an interpreter career. The next one is myth and perception. If the interpreter interprets consecutively, it is an indication that she is less skilled than an interpreter who uses simultaneous interpretation. But in the fact, consecutive interpretation also needs high skill, and they've enjoyed it. The second myth is consecutive interpretation is too time consuming, but the fact, the perception can be countered with the argument that if simultaneous interpretation is inaccurate and has to be repaired and clarified numerous times, it can take longer to provide the work than when using consecutive interpretation. The next one is model of interpretation and their role in consecutive interpreting. There are three kinds of models. The first one is textual processing models. The second one is cognitive model, and the third one is a meaning-based model. Consecutive and simultaneous in legal context. The witnesses note that they found the interpretation easier to understand when presented consecutively, especially during complicated questioning. They identified that the interpretation were most grammatically correct, use more of the natural feature of ESL, and exhibit fewer false start and less repetition in the message. They also observed that they felt more relaxed when the interpretation was presented consecutively, allowing them to participate more fully in the trial. When presented with simultaneous interpreting, the deaf witness commented that they observed more frequent false start and repairs, and found that the interpretation moved closer to the structure of English. Deciding factor in the use of consecutive interpreting. Most interpreter educators reported that they use consecutive interpreting in their own work as interpreters and use the following variables in making the decision to do so. First, complexity and density of information. Second, setting. Third, consumer non-conventional use of sign language. Fourth, consumer is a child. Fifth, consequences of interpreting error are grave. Six, when working with a deaf interpreter. And seven, one educator added an additional factor. Implication for our field. There are several opportunities that emerge for the profession from research on consecutive interpreting. Educators and students have opportunity to explore methods of integrating research into the classroom, bringing a new awareness of the role of cognitive model of interpreting and of consecutive interpreting as part of the critical skill set that interpreters require throughout their career. The conclusion is it is clear from the literature that there are advantages to teaching consecutive interpreting as a distinct skill set that will be needed throughout the career of a signed language interpreter. It is thus critical that students receive solid training in the use of consecutive strategies and learn to apply them effectively as they work. By exploring when and where consecutive interpreting might be used most effectively, we will be exploring ways to better serve those who rely on our professional service.